Hey, this is Bart again of StartupMath.com. I wanted to talk about what happens during an M&A exit. So this is the same example that we had in the previous posts, but let's just assume that following that Series A, the company was then able to sell itself. And then let's give two examples. In one scenario, the sale was for $50 million, and in another scenario, let's say they didn't do so well, the sale was only for $5 million. So let's take the first example of a $50 million sale. Now, at this point, it makes sense to talk about what a preferred share is. Basically, when a VC investor invests in a company, they're not just purchasing common shares of the company, they're buying preferred shares. And preferred shares have certain rights. One of those rights is to get money out of the company before common shareholders. Those preferred shares can also be converted into common at the option of the shareholder. And that decision of whether to convert or not to convert basically comes down to whatever makes the VC the most amount of money. So in this case, if the company gets sold for 50 million bucks and there are 3.2 million shares in the company following the Series A, that means each share is valued at $15. So if this number is higher than the value of any of the shares in the previous rounds, then it makes sense for the VC investor to convert his preferred shares into common shares because he basically has the option of either selling each share for $15 or getting $2.45 or $1.75 per share. And in this case, it's clear it's going to be he's going to convert to common. Um, One thing to note is that the investor would get $2.45 back per share if he has a 1x liquidation preference, but often you can have a 2 or even 3x liquidation preference, which entitles the VC investor to get 2 to 3 times their money back. Um, Even in that case, the VC would still convert to common because there's such a clearly higher value per share for common than there would be even at 3 times um, the Series A price. So assuming that the VC converts to common, this is kind of how the returns end up figuring themselves out. So the founders own 31% of the company. So 31% of 50 million is $15.4 million. And then the option holders um, in that were initially for the options that were initially created in the seed round, they get $2.2 million. And then for those additional options that were created before the A round, those are worth $2.8 million. And for the VC investors, similarly, they owned 8.8, the seed investors own 8.8% of the company. Um, and then the Series A investors own 12.6% of the company. And when I say investors, I mean the seed investors own 8.8% of the company in the Series A. Same thing with the future investors. So you're simply multiplying your percentage ownership times the value of the exit. Um, Now let's say that there is a low exit scenario, meaning that um, the share price the per share price is actually lower than the share price at which the company was invested by the investors. So in this case, if it was a $5 million sale, each share is worth $1.54, which is below 245 and 175. In this case, the VC investors will decide to basically get their money back. So instead of converting to common, they're going to demand that they get their liquidation preference. So what actually happens in this scenario? Well, they invested $500,000, so they get $500,000 back. And then the Series A investors invested $4 million, so they're going to get $4 million back. So if you add these two together, that adds up to $450,000, meaning that only $500,000 is left for the common shareholders. Um, Now, the common shareholders, following the preferred shareholders cash out, own about 75% of the company because the preferred shareholders have given up those shares in exchange for the cash. Um, but unfortunately, that only amounts to a value of $377,000. So just kind of skipping over here, what's interesting is that the common shareholders only get about $500,000 back, whereas the VC investors get their entire initial investment back.